We would have never thought it just a couple years ago, but the Mizzou Tigers are looking for a third consecutive trip to the SEC championship game. Of course, right now in the middle of spring practice, we bring in Jack Hummel of KOMU to help us break down the Tigers. Jack, thanks so much for joining us.
Mark, thanks for having me back. It's always a pleasure.
All right, let's start with, and I've done quite a few of these around the country with a number of bloggers and broadcasters, and we typically dive into, okay, who's been lost and who needs to step in and replace those guys, but I'm going to go with a guy that's already been in place. He's been the starter for a full year, and even then some before that, going back to 2013 and replacing James Franklin. That's Matty Mauk, because it may not be the Matty Mauk that we've seen in the past stepping on the field in 2015. So kind of fill us in on the work of Matty Mauk.
Most definitely, you said it best too. I mean, I think it was during one of the games towards the end of the season. An announcer had a great line. He may have a beard, but he is still young, and he is a developing player, and I think this is kind of his year where Matty Mauk's really got to kind of break out. He's looking very, very strong, very much fat, a lot faster than the last season. His body fat's gone from 20% down to 11%. During spring testing, he ran a 4.40. He was actually upset about that, if you can believe that. He was looking to maybe have a 4.3, which are impressive numbers, especially at the quarterback position. And his expectations for himself are extremely high. He'll tell you he expects to be the best quarterback in the country, and wants to, and is putting in the work in order to do so. And so I think you got to look for him. He had a really, really good kind of first season back in 2013. Last season had its ups and downs. Struggle with outside, finding some connections with offense. But I think this year is going to be a year where you definitely want to keep an eye on Matty Mauk, and he's hungry, and he's looking to get after it this season.
So we should have done this video before I cut my top 5 SEC quarterbacks for 2015, because I had Mauk down in the list. Still in the top 5, but maybe I should have rated him a little bit higher. He's definitely shown quite the work ethic during the offseason. All right, looking at the rest of the offense, we've got Mitch Morse, offensive guard, moving on to the NFL draft, a probable draftee, along with running back Marcus Murphy. So what stands out in regards to filling in for those guys and the rest of the offense coming up this fall?
I think from an offensive standpoint, I think they have lost, like you said, quite a few guys where there's a lot of positions that are open right now that are looking to be filled. And it goes all around as far as from an offensive standpoint. It goes wide receivers as well. In speaking with Matty, the past week or so, and the week before last as well. Last season they struggled from an offensive standpoint to connect with wide receivers. That was one of the big things that analysts and everyone kind of cited, was that the fact, not to give Matty Mauk an excuse by any means for performance-wise or issues offensively, but he struggled to find wide receivers, and I think this year is the year where Gary Pinkel and the coaching staff's been grooming these younger guys for the past 2 or 3 years, and now they're looking to step up into those starting roles in those positions. And it's evident that these spring practices, I've gone to a couple of them in the past 2 weeks, and even from the very beginning when they started doing weights, and now they're kind of getting on the field activities. It's evident at these spring practices that these guys are hungry. They're looking for the starting positions. They know that these positions are up for grabs, whether it's a starting spot or a second string. And right now it's early, sure, but it's tough to say who will be starting because it is so close. All these guys, they're hungry. They're pushing and testing each other, and they want that starting position. And they're certainly going to push one another to the limit and make sure they get on. In the best position possible they can to earn those starting spots. But from another offensive standpoint, you do have guys that are stepping up. You have senior center offensive lineman Evan Boehm, who has always played a real large leadership role for the Tigers. But I think this year, especially being his senior year, looking to maybe play after his senior year this year, he's going to look to step up in a leadership role, more so than he has done in the past. You have a lot of younger guys too, like I said, on that offensive line that are looking to step up. You have the #1 recruit last year, Andy Bauer from St. Louis, Missouri. Andy and I grew up together. He's an extremely talented, hardworking young guy, and he's an even better person. But he's a hard worker out of anything. We used to work out at the same place, myself being a soccer player, and the work ethic that him and these other guys have, he fits right in with these Missouri Tiger offense because they are one of the hardest working lines you'll really ever see, whether it's in the weight room or on the field. So I think right now, it's early for these guys to kind of say who's going to be in a starting position. For me to take a guess, but right now it's up for grabs, and it's promising. Being at these spring practices, seeing the Missouri Tiger offense compete and work together right now, and it's exciting. We, like you said, we've had some successful years in the past with our first couple years in the SEC, and they want to keep this bowl. They keep it rolling, and they want to make sure that they don't get too complacent. Their work ethic certainly shows that they're not.
Jack Hummel joins us from KOMU. They're in Columbia, Missouri, and it's another off-season at Mizzou. So what that tells us is that there are more defensive ends moving on to the NFL. That seems to be a rite of passage there in Columbia for the last, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And two of them, Shane Ray, the all-time sack leader with the Tigers, and also Markus Golden. Shane Ray looking to be a top 10 consensus guy for the NFL draft. So your thoughts about those guys moving on, and also who do we expect to see fill in the gap?
Defensively, when you're thinking of the Missouri Tigers, especially this offseason, the biggest thought, the foremost thought is a replacement or replacements for Shane Ray. They had the piece on ESPN SportsCenter last night. And you can't look past the starting duo of Michael Shear and Kentrell Brothers, who both last season combined for more than 100 tackles. Mizzou is only one of 2 SEC schools to have players with more than 100 tackles. And that's just the beginning for these guys. Michael Shear, 6'3", 235, redshirt junior out of St. Louis, Missouri, and Kentrell Brothers, 6'1", redshirt senior from Oklahoma. These guys are, 2 players who have been, again, kind of like similar to the offense. They've been these guys who have been groomed, seen starting positions, seen second-string positions, but this is their year when they really are hungry and they're ready to step up. And those are 2 guys who have kind of been kind of under the radar and haven't really received a lot of attention, both in the media but on the field as well. And this year they're really looking, as a junior and senior duo, they're really looking to kind of make this year their year on that defensive line. And so I think, that, not to say that's a replacement for Shane Ray or from a defensive perspective, but I think these guys, in working with players like Shane Ray, and you're working with the defensive coordinators who turn, in essence, turn 3-star, 2-star recruits like Shane Ray into 5-star, top 10 NFL draft picks. You have to take that into consideration when you're thinking about these guys who have kind of come up through the ranks and now have a year or 2 years to kind of get themselves in a position where they too could maybe be, NFL first-round draft picks. So I think you look at it from that perspective. Again, it's exciting to see these guys kind of have a shot to where now they can come in and really have an opportunity to show what they're really made of. You also have one of my favorite guys on that defensive line is 6'4", 300-pound defensive lineman Josh Augusta from Peoria, Illinois. He has become just an absolute impact player these last 2 years, a sophomore this year. This past season and coming in to be a junior. And he's proved himself season in and season out. He was one of, I believe, 3 or 2 players with Arion Penton that was in the depth chart his freshman year. And obviously his size is a reason solely for that, but his just talent from a defensive standpoint is remarkable for his age and for how young he is. He's one of those guys who came into a position and found a role and took advantage of the opportunity he had here at Missouri, and he's going to be exciting to watch this season. I think he's going to be a huge impact player for this Missouri defense.
Gary Pinkel and company, 3 weeks deep into spring practice. The Missouri spring game coming up on April 18th. Jack Hummel joins us to break down the Tigers. Jack, one last thing. So we look at spring games, and you can throw away the statistics. They only mean so much. It's very controlled. They're looking at situations. Coaches are looking for particular players to stand out, looking more than anything just to keep that unit intact and keep everybody healthy. Is there any 1 or 2 things that you could kind of point to that you would like to see progress and like to see accomplished during the spring season?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing, and it's two-sided, and we'll start with Matty Mauk. I think offensively, I think Matty has the ability to be a player that you can allow to run, and I think being younger, they haven't given him as much room to move and have that mobility. And I think this year he's kind of proved himself. He came into this year knowing I want to run the ball, but in order to do that, I'm gonna have to show the coaching staff that I can do it. And by running a 4.440 as a quarterback, and a younger quarterback at that, that proves the ability that you can have where you're able to run in and out of the pocket. And I think, Matty Mauk, I think this year I want to kind of see the coaching staff allow Matty Mauk to move in and out of the pocket because he has the ability. And I think, when you're struggling to find receivers or to connect with receivers, the next best thing, the only real next option you have is to run the ball, whether it's from a running back or whether you have your quarterback run the ball. And I think the Missouri offensive coordinators really need to allow Matty to run the ball. But in hindsight, I think I'll look to see Maty Mauk really kind of improve on his throwing this year. He's put in the work and he's determined. And Matty's one of those guys who will work until it works. And so I'm really, really, really excited about seeing what Maty Mauk has to offer for this Missouri offense. Another thing I'm excited about, and this is kind of a different aspect of it, but it's just a leadership role, and that sounds really, really cliche, to talk about, especially from an analytic standpoint. But I'm looking for the leadership role in this Missouri offense. You have a lot of guys leaving. You have Shane Ray. We named countless players who have left that are going to the NFL draft. And you have a lot of seniors coming up. Evan Boehm, a senior offensive lineman, defensive back. Kenya Dennis, Russell Hansborough, a senior tailback. These are guys who are going to step up into those Shane Ray, not only position, but leadership roles. They have to really step it up this year, and it's going to be guys, Matty as well, that step up into a leadership role and provide this Missouri offense with that leadership that they need to continue the success they've had. This is a Missouri team who's been doubted since day one. They've been told, you don't belong in the SEC, and they've proved year in and year out that they do, and they're determined to continue to prove that. And so I think for this Missouri offense, that leadership is going to keep these guys tight-knit like the Missouri offense that they are, or the Missouri team that they are. And I think in general, the leadership role is going to prove them success further on in the season and as the season goes on. And it starts now in the offseason like anything else in preparation. Those leadership roles are begin being built now. So I think you look for another year of growth. Again, last year was a year where we went into it with a mindset of we're going to grow and we're going to continue to develop. And I think again that's what this year is. We're still, despite the success, or if you want to call it success that we've had thus far into the our SEC era, they got a lot of room and a lot of ground that we still have to cover. And so I think I'm going to look for this Missouri team to continue to develop and continue to win, most of all.
And just to continue, Jack, on that Maty Mauk narrative that you so insightfully progressed on there, what's fascinating to me is the national perception. This kid jumps out as a freshman, throws 10 touchdowns against 1 pick, helps lead them to an SEC Eastern Division championship, and it's like, wow, he's phenomenal. Then he goes into a sophomore season, you take away Dorial Green-Beckham and LaDainian Washington and really hamstring the offense and limit what he's able to do and the playmakers he has around him. He has basically pedestrian statistics, although the results on the field and the accomplishments are just about the same. The numbers aren't there, and all of a sudden people want to look for the next guy at Missouri and figure Maty Mauk's he's hit his ceiling and that's who he is, and let's try to get somebody else in here.
And that's exactly right, and I couldn't have said it better myself. It is that perception that he gets, and I think at times it can be, and I think any college athlete who's been in a position where you have extreme success early on, that amounts to a certain expectation, for lack of a better term, that is put on your back, and that pressure. And I think for Matty, from Matty's perspective, he takes that pressure and he loves it. He wants the pressure. He wants the expectations. He wants the doubters. He wants the people who are looking for the next guy in line who, because he went through a bit of a sophomore slump, or he had a season that wasn't as great as what people expected it to be. But I think from a outsider's perspective, I think it is at times unfair. And Matty's one of my good friends, so it's hard for me not to back him up. But just from an athlete standpoint, myself being a former athlete, it's tough for these guys to have a successful season, like you said, a short, where you're coming in off the bench, you're a young guy, and you're coming in and you're replacing James Franklin, who'd been a trademark Missouri quarterback for how many years now before Matty came in. And so it is tough, and I think at times can be a little bit unfair. And so I think for Matty, I think his goal this season, and in my hopes for him, is that he comes out and he proves to people, sure, this was my freshman year, I did what I did. My sophomore year, Matty's the type of guy that would never blame for lack of guys out wide. If anything, he'd blame himself for not being able to get the ball to who he did have on the wide receivers. So I think this year I'm going to look to Matty, and I think a lot of people are, to kind of prove people wrong and to kind of show, okay, so my sophomore year wasn't as good as you guys intended it to be, or as we expected it because of how I showed my first year. But again, to go back to my quote that I started with, he may have a beard, but he's young, and so I think you got to give this guy a little bit of credit, with what he's working with and the losses that he's had. And I think this year he's taking that criticism and that pressure, and he's going to turn it into something positive. So again, just another excitement to add to the books for this upcoming 2015-2016 season.
Missouri Tigers perspective and insight from Jack Hummel from KOMU there in Columbia. Jack, we appreciate the time, man.
Thank you very much, Mark. Anytime.